And here we go. Welcome to episode 42 of Baschamania. I am your host, Justin Basch, and thank you for tuning in. We've got NCAA champion and 2020 Olympic hopeful Nahshon Garrett on the show today. Before I dive into a conversation with Nahshon, I want to remind you of two things. One, if you haven't subscribed, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen, and be notified as soon as a new episode drops, and it also just helps support the show. Two, if you haven't gotten in on the Traeger Grill giveaway, we have 1 week left in the giveaway. Head over to Instagram at Baschamania or go to Baschamania.com/giveaway for all the details. All right, let's roll the intro and get this thing going.
It's Baschamania! Let me tell you something, brother. He gave us everything he had in him tonight. What you gonna do when Baschamania runs wild? Oh, it's gonna be a good one. And business just picked up here on the podcast. Oh, yeah.
All right, and we're here with Nahshon. How are you, man?
Hey, what's going on, Justin? Doing excellent.
So what I was just about to tell you, and I'm like, let's get going, is, I always do a deep dive before I do an episode of this show. And when you do a deep dive on you, especially for somebody like me who's in content and marketing for a living, I could have a 5-hour conversation with you. So we might have to do a part 1 and a part 2 to get through everything, but I mean...
I'm totally okay with that. I come in pieces a little bit too sometimes. I got, the jack of all trade thing going on. So I think we're going to be all right.
And I want to talk about that. So let's start with wrestling, obviously. This is a wrestling show. Getting started in wrestling, you've been wrestling a long time. Tell me about your start in wrestling.
Yeah, so basically back in 2000, I want to say 2006. No, yeah, it must have been 2005, 2006. I was given the opportunity at my high school. I had no idea what wrestling was, didn't grow up in a wrestling culture around wrestling people. I don't know anyone in my family who wrestles, no aunts, uncles, brothers, nothing like that who did any of that. We didn't even grow up with sports. We did sports, but we weren't allowed to be a part of.
And that's wild because so many
sports.
good wrestlers your levels are like they started like 3, 4, 5,
Right. So they got that advantage a little bit. And so it was actually interesting because my 7th grade year, I would go to practices, and eventually my mom found out, and she was like, "No, you're not allowed to go there. I don't want you getting mat diseases." We were very sheltered growing up, so we never had that. Oh yeah, this is a sport you're gonna do, or I never had dreams of being
Sure.
an Olympian or being on an NBA team or playing football.
Right.
I never had any dreams. The best thing that I had was a movie called Rudy. I watched that movie, and that I'll tell you that story a little bit deeper once we get there. But
Yeah.
that's the best thing that I had growing up as far as inspiration stuff.
And when you were going from 7th grade and going on, how are you getting better? Because most people start so young and they get better over time. You had to level up really quick. What did you do to kind of get better through middle school and high school?
Bro, the one thing I would say is the things that are out of my control that happened in my life, that matures a person to a place where, in my mind, I used wrestling as more of an outlet and more of a place away from the things that I couldn't control. And so for me, it wasn't about, we're going to have fun. This is a game. To me, it was like, this is where I'm going to basically have therapy.
Yep.
I'm going to have mental stress release, like therapy. And that's where I focused on, hey, this person's beating me, but are they beating me because of something that's out of my control, or are they beating me because I don't understand something or I don't know something?
Right.
And so I always approached it in that way. And I said, well, they won't beat me if I can figure it out. And so then I started taking control. And it was the one place in my life where I was like, yeah, I feel like I have some control in this area.
And like for me, I started wrestling in 7th grade too, primarily because I was a WWF guy. So I just thought, it's wrestling. It's got to be the same. I'm going to be doing leg drops and flying elbows. And I quickly obviously learned it wasn't that, but I never really got any better. I put in the effort. My training partners, my drill partners were sectional champions, state champions. Like, they were good. I wasn't, but it did teach me so much. And it made me diligent, disciplined, everything. At what point? But I kind of knew that. Like by 9th, 10th grade, I'm not on a varsity lineup. I'm like, okay, I'm obviously just not that good. When did you actually realize you were good?
Well, my eighth grade year, which was the year I actually started, and my mom actually allowed me to be on the team. I got to the point where I was sneaking to practices, and she was just like, okay, and
Sneaking to wrestling practice.
Sneaking
what
to
a
wrestling
heathen.
practices. I know. And so, the dishonor of my parent in that situation proves, it proved to work out for me in the end. But yeah, it was. I think eventually she saw, hey, this is something that he loves to do. This could work out for him, and so I'm gonna let him do it. And so I would say that year, I think I took second at NorCal Tournament of Champions, which was basically the North State Championships.
Yep.
Right, and so I took second there, but I was an eighth grader weighing 70 pounds, and so your boy was just a fetus of a young thing.
Right.
So I was tiny, but obviously strong and aware of my body in some ways. So much so that I took second at the state championships. At that point in time, growing into more wrestling, it wasn't really until my sophomore year that I really developed a sense of, I'm actually pretty decent at this. And I actually went to Fargo my second year of wrestling, my freshman year, and I wrestled 91 pounds at Fargo. And I went 1 and 2 at Fargo in both styles. And I tell you, man, it was the worst feeling I'd ever experienced before in my life. I never felt like depression in that way ever before. And so that's when I kind of learned, oh, wow, if I'm going to do this, then I better get better because I never want to feel that feeling again. And from there, around my sophomore year, that's when I really started to pick it up and focus on.
And then what was the path to Cornell from there?
Path to Cornell was I All-American my sophomore year at Fargo twice in Greco and freestyle. I won a state title my junior year at 103s, and my coach, our coaches sent out a video of me winning state to a bunch of different coaches. Cornell responded. We had a relationship with them, and so it was just that inkling of, hey, we would love to have him. Before there was any success, before senior nationals, before anything like that, it was. Right. We can do this. We would love to take him in. And so that's what Cole did. He before anybody else came in, before anybody said anything, he kind of established this kind of relationship where, here's some success, but we want him before even all of that stuff pops off. And then,
By the way, I'd mentioned that I always do deep dives. And one of the things that I saw, which I never went to college. I went to a local community college for 2 weeks. I couldn't have less of a clue of how college works, but I feel like I even more so don't have a clue about the Ivy League. Now, I saw that you were selected for membership in the Quill and Dagger Society. Can you please explain to me what that is?
Yes, I could, but then I'd have to kill you.
I figured as much.
No, so it's just it's a society of people who have made an impact on campus, and were referred to by other people, were nominated by other people to be a part of this, this distinguished group of people. Other than that, there's not really much that goes too much into it, to be honest.
It feels like high society. It feels like you're holding out.
Yeah. It's as far as I understand. So I didn't get too deep into it. I was very much like, oh, this is a great honor. I'd love to be a part of this. And it was really, really kind of a cool thing going through the process. But after it all was all said and done, I was kind of like, that's great. Great to be a part of it, and I didn't really delve too much in it, but it is really cool.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
You're definitely busy at college, and as I was going back and kind of like tracing the ebbs and flows of your college career, if I had this right, you were third place as a freshman, then second as a sophomore, then fifth, and then something switched, and a light switch flipped on, and you go from fifth to an undefeated championship year. I'm curious a few different things. One is, what do you think was the switch that flipped to go from fifth to being an undefeated national champ? And even all through college, because I've asked that question, not that exact scenario, but a similar sequence, and it's usually like the common answer is on the outward to the fan, it looks like there was a switch flipped, but in reality, it was stuff that happened my freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, and then the senior year was, still fifth, third, second, whatever at nationals is an impressive feat. And that's such an accomplishment, just to All-American or just to medal, but then to become undefeated or become a national champ. Like, it seems like from a fan standpoint, the switch flipped. What kind of went on there?
That's a great question. And just to kind of point out something as you were talking, this idea that there are so many circumstances in life that that are completely out of our control, right? Yep. And these are things that we don't factor in, or at least a lot of people don't factor into a person's performance or why they're doing this or why they're not performing as well as they should or have been projected to perform. And so, like in my own life, I know this obviously exists for other people's lives, but my own life, I'm a freshman in college, and I'm getting basically, nightly phone calls, 3 o'clock at night from people saying, oh, hey, this is going on with your mom. This is going on with your brother. This is happening because I have in my family a history of substance abuse in my family. Okay. And that has greatly affected
Sure.
I got away from it, right? Yep. But it's affected my family, right? And so on the outset, like, dealing with my sophomore year at EIWA, so being, getting woken up in the middle of the night to these like crazy phone calls, oh, your brother almost died, oh, this happened, got hit by a car, he's in the hospital, this is going on. My sophomore year to like, I'm about to wrestle in the EIWA finals, hey, your mom's in jail right now, this, that, and the other, like this, that's like, whoa. It's crazy, so there's a lot of things. And in my junior year, just honestly, just cutting a crap ton of weight that was just really, really difficult on my psyche, and on my just on my performance, obviously. Sure. And so coming into my senior year with all of this stuff happening, right? Everything, the uncontrollables and maybe even some of the controllables. My senior year, I developed this sense of it was really a philosophical change, and it was a mental change that it took place. And they always talk about it's 90% mental and 10% this and the other, but really for me, it really got to that point where there was a mental switch that flipped on, because what I believe about most athletes is we have fears that are unrecognized and undealt with. We have anxiety, we have pressure, we have all these things that, people just look at us and they say they just see wrestlers and warriors, right? But internally, there's a lot of stuff that we're dealing with, the doubt, the fear, and it might be outside pressure, it might be pressure from the inside. And so my philosophy during the 2016 year was, it's not what you do that defines who you are. It's who you are that defines what you do. So when you find out who you are, you can live out of your being instead of out of your doing. And so for me, it was just maintaining this place of being and maintaining this identity that doesn't change with whether I win or whether I lose. So I wasn't out there because even my junior year, there was times when I would tech a guy and come off the mat and be very, very frustrated. And I would think to myself, well, why is that? Because I didn't dominate them in the way that I wanted to. I was fearful. I was frightened in that match, or I backed up, or I didn't get the takedown I wanted to. And so I wanted to develop this sense of identity, this sense of purpose, and I was able to do that year where something clicked and I became what I believed I was, and I manifested my belief in such a way that what was seen was seen.
And if my memory serves me correctly, it's funny. I remember vividly when anytime somebody puts their faith on display, especially at NCAAs, anytime over the last decade, I remember it vividly. I remember when Quentin Wright won his national championship and he came on, he's like, I just want to thank Jesus right away. I remember I started going to NCAAs in 2016, and I can't remember what year it was when Jaden sang "Your Will Be Done" before NCAAs, and when Nolf came out to "Stars" by Skillet, and all these moments, and wasn't it you won in 16, which was in New York City, and I thought you came out after and said something like, "I just want to thank you, God, for giving me this championship," or something along that lines, and that stuck with me because it seems like it would be easy to do, to give God the glory after you get something. But there's so many times we finally get what we want, and then we're looking towards the next thing, whether it's the Olympics for you or World Championship or whatever. Anytime any of us kind of get what we want, it's hard to keep that in perspective. And being a Christian, what role did that play, especially throughout your college career leading up to this? Where, like you said, you dealt with a lot of things on the background. And that's one of the reasons I started this podcast, was because having all these conversations with guys like David Taylor and Jordan Burroughs and all these guys, Kale, over the years, I'm not the technical guy. Somebody hits a move, there's a good chance I don't know it. I can appreciate it, but it's the backstories to me. Those are the conversations I've had that I'm like, yeah, you're impressed by Burroughs' double leg, but if you knew what happened 20 minutes before the match, you'd really be more mind blown than that happening. So I'm curious what role your faith played through those ebbs and flow of your college career that led up to that.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you for giving me the platform to be able to speak about these things.
Sure.
Because, the fact that you were able to connect this idea of identity and being with the sense of my faith is huge. Because I say it on this outside, just to kind of be, I don't know, I wouldn't say even be somewhat neutral. I would just say this is just what it is. But the behind the fact is this case of faith, right? What you believe, you manifest what you believe, right? And so for me, I think that you have the people who practice what they believe, and then you have people who, then you have people who there's a practice and then there's a parrot.
Sure.
Okay. So the reason I say that is because there are people who, there's someone who says, oh, look at this person here. They're, giving glory to God. God gets the glory. It's all about his glory. It's all about this. And to be honest, I'm actually a little bit critical of that, just because the way that I understand the scriptures and the way I understand faith so far is this idea. Obviously, the glory is to him, but it's him glorifying himself in us.
Yep.
And so if we don't understand our oneness with him, and if we don't understand that we're doing it as in this cooperative union, a lot of times we distance ourselves from the product of winning. We distance ourselves. We say, no, that it wasn't me. I didn't do it. It was all him. Glory to him. That to me is that for me was, because I lived like that for a long time. That for me presented a sense of just false humility, honestly, for me. And so I had lived like that for a really long time, and I had lived in this kind of, we got the scriptures and, give glory to God. But it was really just like this, me not taking responsibility for the fact that he is in me and that we're one and that we're doing this together, basically. It was like, okay, he's doing it, And so win or lose, it's, the glory goes to him. And this senior year, what I had really realized was it really is this cooperative union going on, where it's him inside of me glorifying himself. He doesn't need me to glorify him. He can do it himself, but he's doing it. He chooses to use me as a vessel to glorify himself in that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people struggle with false humility, because I don't want to turn into a Jesus freak, but for 20 seconds, I mean, my pastor, I tell him all the time, dude, you killed it and this and that. And years ago, I mean, he's our age, he's my age, young 30s, and he early on when he became a senior pastor, it was harder for him to take in the compliments and the praise. And we kind of started joking, so many people just give the glory back to God and they don't receive the compliments. And it's almost like a false humility, no, but God is doing it through you. You still have to be willing. You still have to be able. You still have to put the time in. And there's a difference, like you said, as soon as you're saying, like, look at for, I find it not even ironic, but ironic that I asked you about jumping levels from 5th to 3rd, 2nd, national championship, all these different things, and you never once said, I realized I need to improve my conditioning. I needed to change my technique. I wanted to do this. I wanted to do that, right? Whatever it is. It was instantly about back-end struggles. And that's kind of where I went with that, of the role that you have in not just mental, but overcoming adversity. And we're seeing it now. I don't want to get into the Olympic trials yet, but I'm assuming through your college career, you were obviously that good to become a national champion. And that doesn't happen overnight. And as a freshman, to place how you did, that takes incredible talent. I'm curious what adversity you told me the adversity. How did you deal with the adversity when you were performing, let's say, the first 3 years? Because it's a whole other conversation to talk about adversity when you win. But when you're losing, the adversity, it seems more evident and it's more obvious. How did you deal with that adversity in real time, even knowing that you were going through it, and why? Like, okay, I was a little distracted. Okay, I was cutting too much weight. Okay, I had this going on. This was really serious. How did you deal with that adversity in real time and not kind of give up? Because even if you're that good, sometimes people, you still just see them throw the towel in and leave so much to chance, to wonder, because they don't go through it. They go, yeah, it's not worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to this idea of belief, right? Because, like, for me, as I've kind of grown in this sport and in life, for me, I know that what I've been given, that not everybody has what I've been given, and so I know that I have to steward what I've been given, like, well. And even as we'll go into, like, the scriptures, it talks about, like, whatever we give, whatever we receive, we have to make good measure of it. We have to use what we've been given. It's this idea,
right?
Be
faithful stewards, completely.
We got to be faithful stewards.
Yep.
And I know that I've been given, certain capacity, certain mental strength, certain speed, certain this kind of things that make my body able to wrestle well and have a platform for in the sport of wrestling. Yeah. And so in having these things, adversity, so if it's the case, this is how it kind of comes up, right? If it's the case that I've been given all these things, that means that it's the Father's will that I be a wrestler. Okay. Yeah. So I can just stay with that statement. If it's his will that I'm being a wrestler, then there's a couple of things that need to happen within his will. And I think that the two most important things within his will are, one, that we know him better, and two, that we manifest Messiah inside of us. So if I'm called by Yah to do something, right, and I don't know him better, or I'm not manifesting his presence and manifesting Messiah inside of me, then I'm either probably not in his will, or whatever is happening has not been finished yet. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so for me, every obstacle, every issue, problem that surfaces acts as a reminder to me of, wait a second, am I doing this for myself? Am I in this for myself? Did I give myself these abilities, or did I steward these abilities because I'm a part of his will? And because I'm a part of his will and I'm in his will, he's going to be the provider. So I don't have to worry. I don't have to freak out. I don't have to be anxious about anything. I can trust him because he's the one that placed me here in the first place. And so now I'm using these obstacles to know him better. So I'm saying, oh, here's an issue that's going on in my life. And then I think to myself, okay, well, Father, what do you want me to do? What's your will in this situation? Hey, I'm really struggling with this. Hey, this is happening in my life. Now I can go to him and I can say, your kingdom come, your will be done. What would you want me to do? Right? And at the end of that, then I can receive from him and then manifest, what he says in my life, if that makes sense. And so.
And did you have that throughout college? Was that a constant, or did it take time to evolve to that after, dealing with some of the adversity you had?
It took a lot of time to evolve to that point. And there were lots of tests, like even, there was a point in time when I said, I don't believe that my identity is rooted in winning, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, my identity is rooted in Christ and this, that, and the other. And like, that's what we believe at this point, right? But then when our faith is tested, when something tests it, then what really shows up will be who we really are,
Yeah.
So when I took fifth and, I'm completely broken down and completely devastated and turned to all kinds of other stuff other than the Father, then that showed, oh man, whatever faith I did have or whatever I did believe, it wasn't rooted, right? And so whatever word that we speak or whatever word we believe, it has to bear fruit in our life. But the only way it's going to bear fruit is if it's tested. And so that's why we just got to be careful what we say and what we believe, because everything that we believe and what we say will be tested by the obstacles, right?
Yeah, and I'm curious too. After Cornell, you left real quickly, kind of, to go to Arizona State, and then you came back to Cornell pretty quickly after that. What was the decisions like in leaving Cornell and coming back to Cornell, and what not only went into those decisions, but was that again you kind of, I'm always fascinated because I know for me, whether it's with my wife or in business, I'm always seeking God's guidance on what the next move should be. And
Sure.
for me, it always seems like it's something different every time, and why I feel I should do different things. I'm curious what was that tug to go to Arizona State and come back to Cornell? Like what went into all that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, I think you said it right. The most important thing that we do is that we seek the Father, and whenever we seek Him, what I believe is that like there's a confirmation of the word that He's spoken to us, right? And so like if I'm being sincere in my pursuit of Him, and I really want to know, hey, what's your will? I believe that He brings certain peace, like a certain type of peace and a certain type of confirmation, a word of confirmation from somebody else or a close friend. But most of the time, it's really just the peace that He gives to say, okay, even in the midst of like hard times, like, yeah, leaving was obviously difficult. I'd been here for the 5 years, obviously have this really close and tight relationship, and then to say, oh, I'm gonna go over here, yeah, it was difficult. And then to come back, it kind of just came out of nowhere. It was just like I was in the shower one day, and the Father just said like, hey, what don't you think about going back to Cornell? I'm like, okay, I kind of like it in Arizona. You know what I mean? It's kind of nice.
It's a lot warmer.
Nice here.
You're not getting 3
a
feet of
lot
snow.
warmer, right? And so basically, it's just about. I think it's about hearing His voice and just kind of testing it, and testing it and see, okay, because the thing is, we're not going to always get it right. And I feel like there's a lot of people. Well, and maybe one of my major criticisms about even the church at this point is like, hey, do they teach us how to hear His voice? Yep. You understand? And I'm not just saying like His voice from like the letter of the law, which is, oh, this says this, so that's that. Yep. I'm talking about like, hey, I have a decision to make. I have children. I have a wife. I have this. How do I hear from Him in my everyday life? How do I do so? And so where I don't necessarily know if we're taught well how to do that. And so for me, it was one of those things where I'm just like, okay, Father, I believe that you speak because you say that your sheep know your voice. Yep. Right? And they can discern your voice. And so I'm saying, hey, I need help. What's going on? Please, this is happening or this is happening, and I need some help here. And so, years of just kind of like training to like learn how to hear it, and sometimes it's off. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you'll be like, oh man, I thought that was you. Hey, what happened? And He says, okay, hey, here's this thing that was going on. There was still your mind was a bit here, and the flesh was in this way, so that's why you want it to be over here. Right. And so, we have to be willing to say, oh, okay, I missed you on that, dang it. And then you move on and say, okay, now I know for future reference, this is what it feels like. This isn't what it feels like, kind of thing, but you have to test it though.
Right, and I feel like so many times too, a lot of times I feel like it depends on what we want. And if all of a sudden we want something, I think that sometimes is I know for me, if I'm praying about something and God shows me something I don't like, I'm like, are you sure? Let me read another chapter. Let me read this. Are you sure? But then if
Sure.
it's something where I'm like, I really want it, and it seems like, well, wait a minute, this, and it's almost like A Beautiful Mind when he's like doing all the stuff on the chalkboard, and it's like some elaborate equation, But
Right.
from a simple wrestling standpoint, what went into both those decisions to go and come back?
The decision to leave was twofold, right? The first thing was that I had a family who at the time were homeless, and so it was a lot easier on them to just move them closer from California to Arizona, as opposed to all the way to New York at the time. And so that was the first thing that kind of went into it. And secondly, actually Zeke, my sophomore year when I had made the finals, Zeke actually reached out to me my sophomore year and said, hey, I think you'd be good for freestyle, this and the other. So we had developed a relationship my sophomore year where, by the time my senior year came up, he was, we had already developed a relationship where it was like, okay, obviously head of, men's freestyle head coach, for the Olympic teams. And I've seen him in many Olympic corners.
Yep.
Dude's good. I think I'd like to learn from him and just kind of get his perspective on things. And so at that time it was just like going over there, kind of receiving what I could from someone at that kind of level. Yeah, in the season, exactly.
And then what was it like coming back? I mean, now you have, Chas Tucker, Vito Rugia, Yianni, like you have such incredible partners. What's it like in that room right now, training with that caliber of a group of guys?
Yeah, so that was really one of the primary reasons why I came back. Where I was looking at, I was like, hey, so you got so you got all these younger guys who are obviously incredible wrestlers and would make for incredible partners. And so I wanted to put myself in a situation around a group of people where just everyone you were around is just elite and there's no lack of partners. They're ready to go. They have the same mind. They have the same goal. And when we're unified in that sense, I think that there just seems to be just exponential growth in a person. And so that was one of the reasons why I did come back. And it's obviously it's been good so far.
And I guess the next thing we can kind of talk about is, here you make the world team now in 2018 and then have to back out because of an injury. And sticking with that common theme of overcoming adversity, what was that like to accomplish something where making a world team is so cool because you can forever say you were on a world team, but nobody makes a world team and then they're satisfied. You make the world team, it's like checking the box. Nobody makes the world team to say, I'm a world team member. You right. Wrestle off, you win that spot, and it's literally like there's not really even a celebration. Maybe for the Olympics a little bit more because you're an Olympian and that kind of has a cool ring to it. But for making a world or Olympic team, it's really becoming a world or Olympic medalist. What was it like overcoming that adversity? Yeah,
I mean, that one was difficult. That was a really, really, really difficult season. And what I learned in that season was this idea. And not that so much I agree with. So here's what I learned, basically. I learned that there are certain injustices that happen in the world, and injustices that you experience in the world, you become a creditor. You become a creditor to the world when you experience injustice, right? So if something happens in your life, you're like, hey, that wasn't fair. And here's the reason why I say that. Here's why I think it was a slight injustice, right? Because I think it's just basic property rights, right? If you work for something, then generally, if you work for something, then that thing belongs to you. You till the land, you plant the seed, you have the tree. The fruit on the tree should belong to you, right?
Yep.
I mean, that seems like pretty basic property rights. And so in my sense, and the way that I applied it to my situation was, hey, I did the work, I made the team. Basically I planted the tree, I watered it, took care of it, did all the work, watched it grow, this beautiful tree is here. I'm about to pick some of the fruit to taste of it, and then like it gets like chopped down, or like it gets like someone takes it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so like for me, that's like, whoa, to me, that's like an injustice. To me, I'm like, dude, that's not fair. That sucks, And
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think it was like the scripture does say that like it's the enemy who comes to kill, steal, and destroy, right?
Yep.
Whoever the enemy may be, whether it be my flesh or whether it be, the enemy, the devil, right? And so I'm thinking to myself, well, I didn't know how to approach the Father in that situation, right? Because like at this point in time, I was in between two kind of ideologies. The first ideology I was in between was everything, like you have no control over what happens in life. And because you have no control over what happens, there's basically no point in trying to like really make anything happen for yourself because, well, you don't know how it will or it won't go, right? And so I was living in this place which I called the ambiguous transition. And in this ambiguous transition, I'm just like, whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And like like it was like this sense of like you're not in control, so there's like no point, right? And that's like the far side of things. And when I lived like that, I tell you, it was really kind of a depressing place, right? It's just like this like sad, mopey, depressing, like, oh, nothing's gonna, there's no point in doing anything. Woe is me, vanity of vanities. It's all vanity kind of thing, right? And then there's this other side, which is like, no, you can you can make choices and you can pursue certain things, but we have to be aware that the final say is his, basically, right? And so the hard part is like for me, and in your relationship, in my relationship with the Father, I'm saying to him like, dude, what the heck? Like I know this really, like I know that you're good, right?
Yeah.
And I know that you do good things for your people, for those who love you. Sorry, that was and I know you do good things for those who love you. Uh-oh. How do I get out of this? Sorry. Okay. So, and I know you do good things for your people, but why am I like what the heck, dude? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I'm doing what you want me to do with what you gave me to do it with, So like, do I blame him and say, is this your outcome? Or do I blame the enemy and say, hey, you stole something from me. This isn't fair. Like, let's bring it to the courts of heaven and kind of duke this thing out. You know what I mean? So I'm in between these two places, right? And if there is no enemy, then it's his fault indefinitely. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so it was hard to bring my opinions to the Father for a certain period of time because I was like, I don't know. Like internally, I was like, externally, I think I was okay. Like, okay, we're good. But internally, I was thinking to myself, dude, this sucks. Like, how could you let this happen? You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, even if it's gonna work out for my good later on, like, this sucks. You know what I mean? And so that was a very difficult time. But through this time, I did learn a lot about. I did do a lot of studying, and I did do a lot of just kind of internal processing, which turned out pretty good for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you haven't really lost a step. Like, you're one of the most talented wrestlers out there, and I'm curious now, like, and this part of the conversation is kind of twofold. Here we are, March 2020, in what can only be described as, I don't know, like a doomsday type setting. It's funny that the number one thing, Burroughs just texted me like 5 minutes ago, and one of the things he said is, what a time to be alive. And like, that seems to be like a common theme right now. What a time to be alive. Like, it's craziness. And, your 2020, along with other Olympic hopefuls, is so unique because you have two huge things apart from everything else you deal with behind the scenes. You have one, absolutely loaded weight classes. You have these weight classes where you have to be, you arguably have to be one of the best wrestlers in the world to make the Olympic team, and you have to constantly get ready for that. And on top of that, now the Olympic trials are postponed. You don't even know when they're going to be. So I forgot who I was just talking to. Maybe it was Bo Nickel on the podcast, and I was like, how do you trust at this point, and maybe it's just day to day, but trusting in God's plan for the next couple of months, whether it's being better than every other guy at your weight class, whether it's not knowing when the Olympic trials are. I mean, Trump just said this stuff isn't going to wash out until July, August. Like, does that mean we're going to be locked down until July, August? Does that mean Olympic trials aren't going to be until July, August? Does that mean Olympics are going to be next year? Like, man, it's for somebody like me, the control there is hard to let go of when it comes to schedule. I don't necessarily always care about outcomes, but my regimen, my routine, my schedule, I need that. And you're in a place right now where it's like, especially as a Christian, where you can trust in God's plan, but it's also hard because, like you just, kind of talked about for a few minutes with dealing with the frustration of why, like kind of shaking your fist at God, not even in a bad way, but it's like, I don't understand, and that's one of the things that when Jaden was singing that song, Thy Will Be Done, that was one of the things that for me, knowing like kind of his story, knowing that he was on the verge of suicide and he's here singing a song in front of thousands that says, I don't understand how a broken heart is a part of your plan, but you carry on because you don't know how that plays out in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. We talk on the micro a lot. Like, how is this going to play out in the World Championships? How in March is this going to play out for the Olympic trials? We're not thinking how this is going to impact your kids, how this is going to impact your family, what 55-year-old Nahshon Garrett thinks about when he was competing for an Olympic team, right? What is your perspective and mindset right now with this chaos of both the insane competition you have and knowing who you have to be better than, and then the unknown, dealing with that?
At the end of the day, I only truly believe in my heart that I have to be better than myself. I think that kind of takes care of at least one part of that. Again, everyone's good. If I like nitpick on like, who's, good and what they have. And I think that times when I start to when I wrestle to other people or I wrestle, I'm going to wrestle their style, then that's when, I don't know, I feel like I start to lose myself in that. And then I start like becoming like them. And I'm like, I don't want to become like you. I just need to be myself. I just want to be the best version of me. And so as far as that goes, for me, I'm the only person that stands in my way. Truly. And everyone else, they're obstacles, right? They're the obstacles that the hurdles to jump over, some maybe a little bit bigger than others. But the smallest hurdle can trip us over, right? So we don't ever overlook anyone, and we don't overlook anyone, right? Because we trust in our own training and we trust in our own preparation and our own abilities.
Yep.
So that's the first thing. With regards to the social pandemic that's taking place within this month, the only thing I have to say about it is, without going into like too many crazy conspiracy theories.
I know. I just had Dake on the podcast with it was 5 guys in the course of an hour. And I literally think that Kyle and I could have chatted for an hour. I think I only asked him one question, and he paved the conversation perfectly because he's so intelligent. You don't have to ask him the question. He goes there.
Yeah, he's definitely good for. I remember the last real conversation we had was a solid probably 2 to 3 hours, and we were just all over the board talking about a bunch of different things, philosophizing in a sense.
Oh,
yeah. But what I would say is, what is happening right now is a test of of how we work together as a society. It's a test of how much control other powers have over us as a society. And it's sad to see that the pandemic it's like watching a movie, man. It's like we've watched so many movies where we see, hey, I would never do that. Oh, I would never do this. It's like you bought 500 bags of toilet paper, dude. Like
Right.
that's not cool, It's
That's
like,
where Hollywood scripts start.
right? Exactly. Like they are writing this thing out, and we are
Right.
playing into it like pawns.
Yep.
And so the one thing I would say is that like there are at the end of the day, that what we have to understand is there are powers that are beyond what we see, and there's powers beyond what we understand. And these powers that are at work are not necessarily for our peace, and they're not for the goodness of humanity, no matter how much things appear to be. Generally speaking, they're out to deceive and destroy. And so with that being said, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, sorry, your video went a little stale. And with that being said, it's yeah, we have to be aware that the battle's not against flesh and blood. It really isn't, and that's been my conclusion without going into the conspiracy stuff.
And how are you maintaining peace through it? Like how are you maintaining a sense of normalcy from a standpoint of, trying to, I know some guys like to peak at certain times and some guys let off, and some guys, there's so many different training regimens and preferences on training, and even as simplistic as diet and weight or training, what do you think is the reason you're able to maintain kind of a sense of normalcy right now?
The first thing I would say is definitely my wife. She is a very peaceful person, and so
that'll help.
Yeah. So I kind of I kind of pull from her a lot in these kind of times, but I think, I mean, I think it goes back to this idea of like, if we're believers filled with the set apart spirit, like our lives should look different than other people's lives, straight up. And I just have a hard time. If there is a difference between the peace that Yeshua gives us and the peace of the world, if there was a time for it to be seen, it would be now.
100%.
For sure. But I also think that peace is like something that's developed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that peace is something that's, for example, if there was persecution, or if you were being persecuted, if I was being persecuted, like how would you know peace in a situation when you're persecuted if you never practiced that peace, or if you never understood that peace, or if we never took the time to practice how to receive this peace?
Yep.
You understand? And so at this point in time, I think it's this idea of just like learning how to like sit and like receive his peace, and like learning what his peace looks like. Because in different situations, it might be different things, Sometimes his peace is like stillness, and sometimes his peace is like, I'm going after something, He gives us a peace in different ways. And so, so for me, having a solid wife, and a good thing in her, and just maintaining communication and connection with the Father. That's pretty much it. And realizing that people aren't my enemies. Like no one out there is my enemy.
Yeah.
Like the people I've been talking with and the people I've been seeing, like we're everyone's pretty like chill about this. What's going on is everyone thinks that somebody else is going crazy, and all these people over here are going crazy, and this. But I feel like everyone is like, "Oh no, I'm good,"
Right.
No, like, "Oh, we're good, we're safe over here."
Right.
Stop listening. They say like the coronavirus has spread through the eyes, man.
Yeah.
So what you see, what you hear on the news and media and politics, it's we just have to be really careful and cautious about it.
And I know one way too that kind of segmenting into one of the last verticals I want to chat with you about here is one of the other ways I know you stay busy. I don't know if it's how you keep peace, but keeping busy is you create content. And as a guy who's on a marketing agency for 12 years, and as a guy who's helped a lot of wrestlers with a lot of content marketing, I can appreciate that. So I'm curious, so many guys either don't like it, they call it a distraction, which I understand how you can be distracted by anything. But, I'm curious what got you kind of started with creating content and, you're everywhere, Instagram, YouTube, making podcasts. I'm actually kind of bummed because you made 2 vlogs about the road to Tokyo, and I haven't seen one in about 3 weeks. But I'm curious what got you into content creation. Before I hold you accountable for where the vlogs have been, what got you into the content creation to begin with?
First of all, thank you for that. I actually have 4 episodes loaded up, but here's my big issue, right? My big issue is in some ways caring too much what people think. The content that we see so far is the content that you've seen so far is probably about 5%. It is the tip of the iceberg of what I want to do and what my heart desires to do. But because of, opinions of others and that kind of thing, I only put out so many, and I only do so much on that, So with regards to creating content, I think, I don't know, I guess it's always been something I've been really fascinated with, because whenever I would watch shows growing up, Disney Channel, and I would see these kids and I would see, people doing all these things, I wouldn't say that's really cool. I want to continue watching this. I have a twin brother, and we would say we can do that,
Yep.
we can make that, we can try this. And so for us, and I think that thing is kind of just stuck with me. The content creation is more of an outlet for the creative nature that's instilled inside of me. It's I can put my intentions into music, or I can put my intentions into journaling or writing or video work or podcasting or something, and I don't know. I think I just want it to mean something, and I want it to be valued, and I want it to be, and not that I need it to be, but once I created something, that's I'm good with it. Yeah. Once I've made it, I feel a sense of accomplishment and a sense of my own self-worth in creating and making something. The issue is, right, that it's easy to get caught up in the euphoric feeling of oh wow, I had this many likes on this post, and this many people commented on this one, and and it's and I'm I'm gonna be sitting here sad because these many people didn't like this post, or they did like this post, or didn't get as many views as it should have, and it's it's so in some ways I don't want to be controlled by that.
Yep.
But in some ways I'm asking myself, well, if I've been given a gift, how do I steward it, right?
Yep.
If content creation is something that I'm good at, then how do I steward it without allowing it to remove my freedom? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think for me, I started BASCH Solutions in 2008. Aside from putting out Instagram photos, I didn't create any content for myself until 2020. For 12 years, I've been helping other people create content because, to a degree, I'm the same as you. I get excited to create content. I was telling my wife, I went to Big Tens. I had a media credential. I'm sitting at press row. I'm playing on my laptop, working on stuff. And I'm like, man, here I'm making good money. I've got a good company. And I'm out here grinding on my laptop, making I was laughing, telling her, I'm I want to be the first person on the planet to put out the Big Ten Championship Finals matches in a little graphic. I want to be the first person. I don't want Flo to beat me. I don't want USA Wrestling, Big Ten, nobody. I want to be the first one. And she's like, you are a true entrepreneur. Because like that to me, like having my hands dirty, that's where I have fun. And this podcast has been that. And for me, it's a sense of, you know, I think that's why for so many years I could create content for others, because that's the best of both worlds for somebody like you or I, where it's like, yeah, I don't really I don't want necessarily the opinions, the feedback. I don't want this, I don't want that, which is why I haven't put out too much video for the podcast. I don't like this, I don't like that. I could look better, the studio could look better, everything. But it's trying to balance that. And for so many years it was, listen, I'll help you create content. I've got an entire team. We'll create content for you. You put it out. And now the feedback is going to be about you. I don't get the feedback because you're putting the content out. And it got to a point where with this podcast, I was preaching to so many clients the importance of, I think everybody should have a podcast. I think the amount of content we individuals should be creating is only going to skyrocket. I think if Lauren and Jordan had a podcast every week about what they were dealing with as a couple, who is not listening to that? I don't care if you're a wrestling fan. I don't care what you are. You're listening to that podcast. And the same is said for so many different things. And that's why with this podcast, it's like, man, I have the knowledge about how to create a podcast, even though it's the most simple thing on the planet. I have the knowledge to create a podcast. I have the relationships within this community to have people come on. And I'm like, you know, I had a talk a couple weeks ago with a coach who he's more anti-media and he's more anti kind of podcast. And, you know, from a Christian standpoint, we went back and forth on scriptures for a couple hours where it's like, you know, well, should we really boast? Do we really have to tell our story? Shouldn't we be living out the story? Shouldn't we be living out our faith? And I said, yeah, but my conviction is if God's given me a platform to help tell these stories, and then I get text messages saying, man, you don't know what it was like for my son, for me, for my daughter, for my spouse, for this person to hear this wrestler they look up to tell a story of overcoming adversity. Or you don't know how important it is that they heard that their favorite wrestler, Bo Nickel, loves Jesus, and that Bo Nickel hears from God in practice, and all these things. So if I have the platform, who am I to deny God's work in me of doing that work through me because of feedback, because of opinions? These are real things, but that's that's kind of where I'm at too, where it's like, man, I kind of want to put out more and more and more. It's like, now I got everybody telling me here 42, 43 episodes in, like, you should do a recap show, you should do this, you should do that. I'm like, I don't know. Like, my show is kind of made because I have really good guests. I think I have, you know, amazing guests with the subpar host, whatever. But you should do a show. I don't want to. But, you know, and that's the other thing too is, I know from an athlete, like for you, it's a lot of work creating content. And whether you're getting distracted or whether you're mixing the emotion of a reaction of a vlog with your actual wrestling, those are different worlds, but they can collide. Because if you're having insecurities or a negative reaction to a vlog or an Instagram post, that translates over to your wrestling. And I'm curious how you kind of separate that. And I'm sure that's something you're still really kind of figuring out, like how to separate the two and the emotion of, you know, there's going to be people who no matter what you do, they're not happy. But I'm curious, how do you kind of keep that separate and not let that, because I'm sure there's a lot of people there's a lot of kids who want to be Instagram famous, and there's a lot of kids who want to create content because they want the fame, right? Like, I think you and I are both at the place where we don't necessarily want fame, or we don't really want to be well known because of the content we create. We just want to fulfill those gifts and fulfill that work we're doing. So from a standpoint of, you know, balancing your content creation and your work, how have you found yourself best separating the two?
Great question. Yeah, I mean, I think that's so. Is the question you're asking as far as the different pieces of content that I'm creating? How am I?
Well, I think you're creating a lot of content. You're creating vlogs. You're creating podcasts. You're creating, Instagram TV content. You're creating a lot of content. And one of the reasons you're telling me you're not creating more is because you want to make sure to kind of distance yourself a bit from the reactions and getting too caught up in that. And at the same time, you obviously don't want to mix those potential negative reactions with your wrestling. Because wrestling in itself, there's a lot of guys who don't go on social media because they can't handle rankings and predictions and previews. And I get that. Because if one person tells me I suck, I could agree with them, but I want to know why. You know what I mean? And as a wrestler, like, you have to perform. And if you're like, listen, you suck, you this, you that, even if you're wrong or right, I'm gonna be a little bummed, right? And some people just aren't like that. So I'm just curious, when you're consciously trying to balance keeping the emotion out of it from the reaction and not letting it affect your wrestling, whether you just won't post on Instagram or whether you won't create a podcast or a vlog, like how you balance and kind of keep that separate when you step on the mat.
It's interesting because I feel like I feel like it's a seasonal thing.
Yep.
And I feel like within each season, that's when maybe a guard is up, or maybe that's when I feel like more like I'm able to, whatever they say doesn't really matter. I'm putting this out because I feel like I just need to get something out.
Right.
Sometimes I just need to get something out of me, and getting it out, like, I'm happy, I'm satisfied, and that's it. And so, I think that for me, it comes in waves. It comes in like these like waves of like, okay, I have a funny video idea. Can we do it right now? Yes, we can do it right now. Okay, we're gonna do it.
Right.
And then there's like times where I'll have a funny video idea. Can we do it? Not really. So then it goes into storage. That would have been a good idea, kind of thing. So as far as like dealing, and as far as like dealing with the comments of people saying this, that, and the other, like, there has been times when like people like I've had people hit me up and say, oh, you're not this, the other, and where they, I would, comment back to them, and I'd do the same thing where I'm like, why, dude? Like, this sucks. You don't even know me.
Right.
Like, I guarantee you, if you got to know me, you'd say, oh, he's a pretty good guy. I'm sorry I said that.
Yeah.
So like, and so I generally jump at the opportunity to show that I'm a good person, to be honest. Not that I feel like I have to defend myself, but there are people like, be in my comment section or whatever, where there's been at least like 2 or 3 like young men who have said like, hey, I'm sorry, I really didn't mean to say that about you, like, that was pretty messed up and blah blah this and the other. And I would just say, hey, it's okay, like, I get it, we get caught up, and it's but we're cool, and so I don't know, times like that are kind of cool, because then you get to see like, hey, I'm not trying to defend like that I'm this or that I'm that. I just like, I put this out because there's so much crap out there. There's just so much like stuff that is just, it's not beneficial. It's not uplifting. It's not, it's not good for people to watch and to see and to take in and digest. And so I'm just like, I want to put out something that, is healthier than that. You know what I'm saying? Like, at least what I'm doing, it's going to be healthier than what they're doing. If I'm going to be comparing, it's better than that.
Right.
And so, yeah, you know what I mean? But it's a seasonal thing.
Yep.
It's a seasonal thing. For me, it is a seasonal thing where I'm like, it ebbs and flows. I feel it. Okay, I'm doing it. So with that being said, about the videos, my vlog videos, I actually had 4 episodes up. They're actually loaded up on YouTube right now. 4 episodes.
Dude,
but,
put them live.
Bro, I know what I'm saying. I hear you. And I'm going to put up episode 3 for you.
Thank you.
Because of this. Because sometimes we put out content and like, I don't necessarily know that I'm looking for a response or that I'm not looking for a response, but I do things because I think that people would like genuinely want to see something,
Correct.
like, oh wow, like that would be great to see that. People talk about, oh, we wish we knew what you were doing. People hit me up all the time. Oh, we wish you, do you have any food tips? Do you have any weight tips? Do you have any weight cutting stuff? And I'm like, yeah, I do, blah, 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 this and the other. And so like, here's a whole vlog where me like literally explaining all these things, and like 3 people have viewed it. And I'm like, dude, that sucks. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Especially when like you promote it and you're like trying to do your best job, and I'm cutting it and I'm putting it all together. So for the response, like this kind of like supply demand, like it makes me feel good in this supply and demand thing where it's like, there's a demand. I would rather meet a need that I see and feel good about that than to be like, I'm just putting out, a bunch of stuff. It's like, I don't know. I don't want to put out the series that people don't eat. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's easy to get caught up with the vanity metrics. And from a professional standpoint, a lot of my clients get hung up on that. Like, we just took on a client a couple of weeks ago. They own a couple of buildings downtown. We're helping them with social. And he's like, all right, so should we start tracking followers? I go, no. I said, it's much more about, if you have 50 followers, make sure you're reaching and you care about those 50 people. If you start looking at followers, you're going to start putting out content that's not genuine to manipulate and trick people into following you. And it is tricky balancing that. Like, it takes consistency to build that audience to where they care. And for me, success of any kind is addicting. So even for a podcast, if you're seeing numbers go up, even one extra listener every week, it's exciting. But then you start wanting 2 more listeners or 5 more listeners. And I think for me, I found where I get the most fulfillment and contentment is I'll notice I launch an episode and I look, okay, how many people listened to it in the first hour? Okay, great. Okay, Nahshon shared it. How many people listen now? Okay, cool. And that's kind of contagious in itself. But then if I get like one text message or one DM on Instagram and somebody's like, dude, Nahshon, I didn't know that about his brother. I didn't know that about his mom. Thank you so much for, having him on. Now I'm like, I'm good. I don't look at the numbers nearly as much because I got that contentment now from somebody's message saying like, thank you for doing that. And so it's definitely a struggle. It's not as easy. And I feel like especially getting started before you get traction, that's like, especially with like podcasting or YouTube, like now that I'm 42 episodes in, consistently at least one a week, people will say, you know what, I like Nahshon, I'm going to go listen. And then go back and listen to 30 other episodes. Having that archive helps. Same with YouTube. I can't tell you, you know who David Dobrik is?
No, I don't.
He's a hilarious YouTuber. Every video is like 4 minutes and 21 seconds long, and you laugh and laugh. Last summer, I was on a trip, and my wife's friend and my friend Jackie showed us this video of David, and it had to be like his 450th vlog. I went back over the next month and probably watched all other 450 vlogs.
Oh, wow.
Like, it's just because it's contagious. You know who Casey Neistat is?
Casey? Yeah.
So, same thing with him. Big YouTube vlogger. I got onto him maybe, I don't know, 500 episodes in. You start going back. And that's when you really build an audience. But building that whole initial content and library, that's what's tough. Because like you said, okay, 3 people, great. It's not like when you have 1,000 videos and people go back. And now it's an upward trajectory because people are going back and listening. So it's definitely tough, man. But you got to post those videos. I mean,
okay, for sure. Okay,
especially now, dude.
You're the one person now. Exactly. You're the one person now where I'm like, at least Justin's watching,
dude. And especially now because, the last thing here, then I'll let you go. Like, we do, as peaceful as you are, and one of the reasons the last episode, I just had literally 5 guys on. I had Dake Burrows, J.O., Ashnault, and Gable Stevenson, because I feel like the fans were so bummed. Man, I'm pissed I can't go to State College. I'm pissed I can't go to the NCAAs. And all the athletes I talk to, especially because I think the ones I talk to are genuine good human beings, are like, it's good. God's in control. Or it's like, I'm staying ready. I don't care when it is, So I think it's important to have that perspective. And I think that's one of the reasons it's also so important for you athletes to put out content yourselves. Like Flow does a great job. Track Wrestling does a great job with giving us access to view content. But they're a business. Sure. So if they're having you on FRL or the podcast, they need to push subscriptions at the end of the day because they're a for-profit business. And, you know, I think when you have a for-profit business and you're creating content 9 out of 10 times, there's going to be some kind of hook. They're having somebody on to talk about the trials, so subscribe to the trials, right? And I think, I know for me, I want to know so much, now more than ever, what is Nahshon Garrett doing March of 2020 when schools are shutting down everywhere? Seth Gross was telling me today he's going to high schools all around him to try to train. And, you know, it's wild what's going on, and I think there's never been more interest in the direct athlete, let alone a wrestler's life, than in a world where there's no sports. I mean, if that's not incentive to turn that vlogging camera on every day, I mean...
Right. So, that's a valid point. You make a valid point. It's a very convicting, valid point.
That was the whole point of this podcast. I wanted another vlog, so let me have him on the podcast for an hour.
Right.
All right. So last thing, before I let you go, just kind of tell me, coming up these next couple weeks, months, like what's your focus as you uncertainty of the trials? You got to obviously train as much as you can. What do you do to kind of just stay focused and what's next?
Yeah. So I would say the one thing that's cool about being up here is that I have people who are here, ready to go. You got good guys to wrestle. We have a facility that we control, that we can be in and be around, even though we're not really allowed to, but we are. And so that's been, obviously that's pretty nice to have that. I don't have to wonder about, am I going to be able to work out? Is this going to happen? Or, that's not a case. We worked out today, and I worked out with Vito, and Yianni was there, and Kyle was there, and Gabe, and Scotty Boykin, and Max Dean, and all these guys were there. So it was it's nice to have that ability to be around guys like that.
Sure.
I guess this idea of moving forward is just kind of this being ready. I mean, every season is a little bit different, but we are told to be ready in season and out of season. And so whatever that means with regards to, conditioning and wrestling, and at the end of the day, there are certain things that we just can't control. And I think I'm okay with that. I can only control what I can, and I'm prepared to do that, I believe.
Yeah, I love it, man. Well, listen, everybody who's listening, go and give Nahshon a follow. Peer pressure him into posting more YouTube videos. Listen to his podcast. He has them all linked up in his Instagram link tree. And I'm sure we are going to have a part 2 here soon to kind of go through his future content.
I also want to put a small plug. So me and the podcast that I'm actually devoting most of my time to, which I'm actually pretty consistent with because of my wife, is we actually have a podcast called iCubed. It's actually a video, more of a YouTube podcast, kind of video podcast called iCubed. It's international, interracial, intercultural advice, dating, and kind of marriage, lifestyle, that kind of thing. And so all the generic stuff that you would think people know about relationships, we're just kind of putting those stuff out there. And so, for the most part, if people are in relationships or thinking about getting in relationships or dating or whatever it is, we kind of talk about a lot of different topics. We're on episode, I think, 10 or 11 right now. And so if they get a chance on YouTube, we're a cute little interracial couple.
Smash that subscribe button. Give the video some thumbs up.
Comment. Let us know. But vlogs are coming up, and I will definitely stay posted with you about that stuff.
I'm holding you accountable, man. Awesome. Listen, thank you for making the time and spending some time this afternoon, and I'm sure we'll speak soon.
Yes, of course. I appreciate it. Thank you,
Awesome,
Justin.
man. Have a good evening. See ya. And that is it for today's show, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. It's available everywhere: Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Anchor, Stitcher, Overcast, you name it. This podcast is available there. So thank you so much for tuning in. Let me know what you thought of this episode, and I will see you soon with another episode.
And the beat goes on, 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 on.